Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Friday Tech Bites. We got a special one up my long sleeve. I got a trick up my long sleeve. But before we get started, I want to know where you all are joining us from. I'm in really cold Ohio today, but what's that I see? Oh my goodness. The United Kingdom is in the house already? Oh goodness. I've got my producer in Texas. The other producer is in Atlanta, but I've got a special guest joining me from the Hollywood of UK, Mr. Michael Paul, one of the Veeam legends. How you doing today, Michael?
Hey, Ricky, I'm doing great, thanks. How about you?
I'm doing great. And I say Hollywood of the UK. You've got a sweater on too, mate. But, it's one of the few places in the UK where you can get pretty good winter in a lot of parts of the year. So, awesome. Thanks for joining us. Sorry for the cheeky comment. But, Michael, hey, before we get into it, introduce yourself. Let the audience know who you are. You're a special one.
Yeah, so my name's Michael. I'm a data protection consultant for Computer Center, and I am what's also known as a Veeam legend. If you don't know what a Veeam legend is, come check out the Veeam Community Hub, and you'll find out an awful lot more information there.
Yeah, Michael is one of our go-to sharers in that community hub, and it was a great way to help, kind of identify new experts. And he's been with a partner of Veeam. He sees a lot of these things every day. And let's walk into this, Michael, of kind of how do we get into this topic? I said to a lot of the legends, I'm like, does anybody have a topic they want to talk about? And you came up with one word. And tell us about that word, Michael, and how you kind of fell into that.
Yeah, so I started talking about encryption or backup encryption. And what I find is there's a huge amount of talk about ransomware and, immutability and the attempts at recovery. But ransomware is more than just that. There's really this cat and mouse game that's constantly going on between malicious actors and people like us trying to protect everyone. And it's focusing on the next level of that, actually focusing on the extortion piece. So backup encryption is a great way to protect against that. And yeah, we'll find out what's the secret sauce to it.
Indeed. So let's jump into the slides here. And, actually, before I go there, got to give Michael on Paul, Miko Paul on Twitter. And you also have a blog. I think it's mikopal.com. Is that
Yeah,
right?
That's the one.
Yeah.
Come
Okay,
join
cool.
it if you want to see all my Veeam stories, whether that's me breaking a lab or just showing all the latest and greatest features that you can do with Veeam.
Hey, I break labs too. I do it every day. But Michael did get highlighted on the community recap this week. But let's start with a quote around encryption. And this is near and dear to my heart. So this is quoting myself. And I like to say, encrypt your data in the cloud or someone else will. And, it's a little bit cheeky, but let me kind of walk into how that came about, Michael, because when I grew up doing IT, I used to say, if you send data out of your building, encrypt it. Right. So think of like tapes on a truck. That's, how old I am. But I think in modern day times, you talk about extortion. I think we need to revisit many areas where we can do this type of encryption. So kind of walk us into the why that you think we should encrypt.
Yeah, so first of all, okay, what is special about backups? Why should we encrypt them? Well, when we actually think about all of those amazing features that Veeam has offered us to integrate with our workloads, that actually makes it a prime target for malicious actors. Straight away, you've just got the obvious, the storage efficiency. Our backups are compressed, they're deduplicated. All the data efficiency techniques that Veeam can squeeze out of this to get the backups as small as possible, that makes egress of that data a lot easier. And if you think how many people have actually got platforms that are noticing if their backup servers are shipping data off-site, you might already be doing backups to the cloud. So a massive egress of data, you're not going to notice. Do you really notice if another full backup goes out the door? Probably not. And then we have the application-aware processing side of things. And just to put that in another context, this is, your Active Directories, this is your SQL servers, this is your Exchange databases, SharePoint, Oracle, so much more. Veeam is integrating with these to actually make sure that when it takes a backup, it's recoverable. So if I was a malicious actor that's actually trying to get a good copy of your database, all of your customers, all the confidential information, what better than a backup that has already been integrated into, so I know it is a perfect and recoverable copy. And So
Yeah. That's like we've always been talking to Veeam about this self-describing portable backup format. So it's kind of a big game target, lack of a better word, because it's all in there. I mean, that's the one way to look at it, right?
exactly, and it's not even just the applications as well, you know. So we need to assume these days that someone is already in the house. You know, the door has already been broken in, someone's in there. We need to make sure that our stuff within the environment is safe. And it might be that someone's in there, they've found a backup. Okay, I'm going to egress that back to a known good location for them. Very bad news for us, but they might not have actually taken down the network yet. So it's not just files that we're backing up here with Veeam. It's actually the entire system configuration. That could mean that I could take an entire copy of a customer's environment and just run it up in an isolation. It doesn't matter how many alarms I trip, because if I don't have that connected to the internet, no one's going to know what I'm doing. And I could script that, and I could be ready for a complete speed run through the environment. I could script an entire attack, and you'd never see it coming.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, Michael. I have been advocating in my ransomware advice to encrypt every stop, not just the ones that leave the building, right? That I kind of preponed. I moved up the notion of encryption. And one thing I want to highlight to the audience is that the Veeam One product has an alarm called possible ransomware activity, and I think it was either V11 or 10. I can't remember, but it added logic, Michael, for high amounts of network transmit, which could be consistent with extortion ransomware. And, it's looking at the Veeam components, which is also good. Now,
Yeah.
one thing I'll also highlight is that I spoke to an organization who saw that alarm hit, but they didn't do anything about it. And that's where my heart hit the floor. So if you do have Veeam One, set up alarms for that possible ransomware activity alarm, so that can really help you out. Just got word from the producers that the application is ready. So speaking of being in the house, let's go and see who's in the house with us. And we're live on 3 platforms here today. So we've got, wow, let's start with North America. We got Canada, Mexico, we've got Ohio, Indiana, Florida, Wisconsin. Randy Lee, thanks for joining us, man. I gave you a thumbs up. Nice guy, one of the Veeam teamers up there in Wisconsin. Got to see him, I guess it was last week. Over in Europe, we have Germany, we have France, we have Switzerland, Belgium, Italy, and Malta. Malta may be a first on the live stream. I'm not quite sure. Maybe a first from one of my shows. That's great. We got North and South Africa going on, South Africa and Morocco. Let's just work on the middle. Let's get, draw the line. And then over in the SARC region, we've got India in the house, and then France again. So thank you all for letting us know where you're from. Now, again, we're going to build the map. So if your U.S. state or your country isn't there, drop it in the chat on all the platforms, and the team, Felicia and Mark, are scraping that up and building the map application for us. Thanks, by the way. That's some hard work that they do for that. I'm very grateful for that. So good stuff. All right. So let's go back to basics here, Michael, and let's start with the basics. Is it truly, it's more of a question, is it as easy as ABC?
It really is. So it is, it sounds a bit of a pun, doesn't it, ABC? But all I need to do is add an unencrypted backup, browse the files, and copy the content that I need. And that is it. And you can see there, so in the lab there, I grabbed the AdventureWorks database because I didn't really want to show any customers' data, of course, but grab the AdventureWorks SQL Server database, just unencrypted backup of the SQL Server. Again, application awareness processing, just like we would expect all of our customers to be using. And I then actually just copied it into another system, added the backup in, and could browse through and browse the entire database there. You can see in that restore wizard that the actual table I've highlighted there is sales order header, and just above that sales order detail, straight away, confidential data, ready for the taking. We need to protect against that.
Let me flip it the other way, Michael. I mean, we could do a lot of this with encrypted data, but there's some controls, encrypted backups. Mm-hmm. There's some controls that would prevent exfiltration, leaks of data and such. But the reality is, one thing I will highlight is I use this all the time, this exact series of the wizard. I use this all the time to move databases from one SQL server to the other. I fiddle a lot with SQL Server. And then on top of that, now, again, we were talking about bad labbing. I do a lot of I don't actually make templates and libraries in the lab. I'm just going to admit it. Because you know what I do? I actually restore VMs. It's quicker. I use Veeam to restore rather than maintain a template library, because I can also take, like, for example, my Hyper-V template, but I could restore it to VMware, or I could restore it to the cloud too. So little lab trick, you can use Veeam to do things that you didn't think you could do. But anyways, so this is the problem. It's that easy as ABC to get to data. So walk us to the promised land. How do we fix this?
All we need to do is, for our backups, we just need to set an encryption password. Now, there's multiple ways of keeping track of that. You could use the Veeam Enterprise Manager for password loss prevention. You could even, if you've got some sort of managed service provider, or just some password vault that is outside of your fault domain, store the password within there. Well worth doing. And that's it. The moment we do that, I went to do the same thing here, copy the backup to another system, try to add it in, and you can just see invalid password. And that's not just a Veeam GUI front end. That is encrypted data using proper encryption standards. Rick, you'll correct me if I'm wrong here, but AES 256 encryption.
Yes, it is. It is AES 256, and it, correct me if I'm, I believe it's called through the WinCrypto API for the Windows encryption parts. And now we can now encrypt on Linux and other things, but at least for in the console management of it. And the components interact with this password for the AES 256 encryption. So it is truly the gold standard of encryption. And we have a FIPS module. And what's interesting, Michael, is we can turn FIPS on even if you're not like US federal government. You can turn FIPS mode on and get a higher band of encryption.
Always worth doing. And before we move on from that, I mean, one of the things I'd just like to point out with this is when you have your traditional confidential information silos, you know, if we think of HR documentation, there might be employee records, you could have, you know, any sort of payroll information. Generally, organizations are using systems such as EFS to make sure that your access controls and the readability of the data are separate things. Why not extend that to your backups? And that's exactly the point we're trying to drive here. There's no reason not to. No performance penalties. Get it done.
Indeed. And I want to highlight that we just posted on the Veeam blog, Hannes Kasparek from our product management team just wrote a blog that highlights the portability of data, because we talk to situations all the time. I'm here in the Central Ohio office, and we have a support center. They're mostly remote right now, but there are still some that come in. But I love hearing these stories where customers will call and it's like, I've lost everything, but all I have is my backups in a service provider. All I have are my backups in a bucket in the cloud. And just to put this in scope here, if you have this encryption password, all you need is that backup data, the bucket and the password, and you're good to go. You can drive absolute data recovery with that. So it's very, very important for the fire, flood, and blood, ransomware, and more. So where can we, I didn't fix the slide deck, so I apologize for that. But there are two main areas that we can put encryption in the mix. One is data encryption in transit and at rest. And the at rest was the example that you had with the screenshot right here. Is that right?
Yeah, so we'll ignore all the graphics here, but effectively, that is the at rest right there. The fact that data can't actually be read. So there are multiple stages to the data encryption journey. First of all, we've got to think about the production at rest. Now that does sit outside of Veeam's remit, but effectively if you have some sort of a PKI infrastructure, generally you can integrate that with any of your underlying storage systems to make sure that your production data is encrypted. And we want to carry that journey through so the data is encrypted wherever it sits. Now, encryption at rest from that sort of physical low level layer, that's great, because that means that if someone was to actually steal the physical hardware, it is still encrypted as such. But we then go beyond that. We move to the data in transit. So it's all good having that data encrypted in the production, but then what about when we actually start to read it? So if you go through Veeam and actually specify your network settings, you can choose to encrypt all of your traffic. And by that, we can make sure that whenever Veeam is reading the blocks and then sharing them on, we know that there's no Wireshark packet captures going on in the middle that could potentially, leak any confidential data. It'd be hard to, but it's not impossible. So then finally, we want to make sure when we save it back down, it's encrypted again. And that's the slide that we had before there, just showing that once that is encrypted at rest without that password, you're not getting that data back. And it's important probably here to warn that actually, Veeam can't even help you with that. There's no backdoors into this. If you lose your password, you can't get your backup again. So.
Yeah, I can't emphasize that enough. And you like me here? I fixed the icons here. I did put the graphics in. That's one cool thing about OneDrive, where you can do that automatically. We did get a question from Anita. Oh, Anita. Oh, question is text or rich file better for password? Actually, neither. I'm going to go one step stronger here, Anita, and say that I really want an out-of-band password management tool. And I know, Michael, you talk with clients about this every day, and you mentioned this a bit. But what do you see people do when it comes to like a mechanism to manage the actual passwords?
Yeah, so it all depends on your IT support structure effectively. Some IT companies want to go it alone. Some also decide to use managed service providers, and as a subset of that, managed service security providers. But effectively, you've either got the option of using proper password vaults. I mean, there's plenty of ones out there. There's some great open source ones as well. KeyPass, just to name one off the top of my head. But then also, the key part of this is that you just want to make sure whatever you're using for your password vault, it sits outside of your recovery domain. There is no point having your password vault that is then backed up within this backup, and you've got no other way.
Yeah, right. So go through the drill. That's so important, Michael, where organizations need to realize that we need to prepare for complete failure. And the thought of, if we have a proper Veeam backup made and it's encrypted with Veeam encryption with this password, if we don't have that password to do one of those imports and absolute recoveries, then we'll be sitting there doing this all day. And if we have the stronger passwords in the mix, this is a pretty short one of 4 characters, right? But if we have the stronger passwords in the mix, it'll be kind of a rough day. All right, producer Mark has told me that the map is ready, so we're going to jump back over there, and we're going to start. Let's start in Latin America. We had Argentina, Chile, and Brazil all tune in, the ABCs of Latin America. There we go. And then over in Europe, we have 3 new responses here. We had Finland, Romania, and Slovakia. Actually, I've been to all 3 of those countries. I was in Slovakia in November. So cool. That was a first for me. So thank you all for joining. Slovakia might be a new one on the streams as well. Good representation throughout Europe. So thank you all for letting us know where you're from. Now, this is good advice, Michael, but what is the trap? What's the one thing we got to be ready to deal with?
Right. Before we go into this, I have to say thanks to Rick for actually making this happen. So when I was putting this together, I said to Rick, I really want a dragon. One of the things I always used to love with, I think it was Firefox, the web browser, you want to start messing with the advanced settings and it would actually give you the warning, here be dragon. So I had to get that. And thanks, Rick, for getting that sorted. So yeah.
It's not me. It's Veeam Creative. I got to give a shout to, it was Microsoft Ignite. We had a sponsored session and we got an opportunity to do the Veeam fantasy role-playing game. This was all Corinne's idea. She had this done. Our Veeam creative people, by the way, I'll tell you this little secret. If you ask our people who do the PowerPoints and all the video design, if you ask them to truly be creative, like make me a dragon, they will put that at the front of the line and get it done. So this is the Microsoft Ignite dragon. So that's the background story of this.
Brilliant. Next time we need Alfred riding it, though.
Oh, there he is.
So there are some warnings. These are just the gotchas that people don't always realize, and there are impacts to enabling backup encryption. If you're not doing what we call the greenfield deployment, you're not deploying Veeam for the first time, you've probably already got backups, and suddenly you want to start changing it. You've gone, oh, actually, yeah, maybe I have got encryption on cloud storage, tape, USB, whatever that is. Every backup you've encrypted, well done, give yourself a pat on the back, because it's far too easy to think of the one thing you've got wrong. it's important to also recognize the amount you're doing right. So yeah, you start to enable the backup encryptions. The next backup is going to be an active full. So make sure that your repository is sized appropriately for that. And then secondly, speaking about the repositories, if you're using REFS or XFS as your file systems, you're going to be used to the storage benefits you get from the synthetic fulls and the fast clone technology behind the scenes. That is not going to work. So you'll temporarily have an increase in storage consumed until all of your unencrypted backups have aged out. And that's because fundamentally, the blocks can't be the same anymore. If your encrypted block is identical to an unencrypted block, it wasn't encrypted in the first place. So it's just something to be aware of there as part of not just your initial, okay, active full, that's going to have a certain impact on the snapshots and the time it's going to take to make that backup. But yeah, you need to make sure your repositories are sized appropriately for that. And then finally, if you are using any sort of deduplication appliances, whether that's, Windows Server has its own data deduplication feature built in, or whether you're using the likes of Dell data domains, for example, you are going to lose the deduplication functionality effectively. It will still exist, but it's going to be incredibly hard to find any deduplication there. So you've got your own design choices to make there, whether it's actually worth keeping your deduplication versus having a less secure backup. But otherwise, if you want to try and strike a bit of a in the middle ground there, you can still focus on your encryption at rest and focus on the access controls to lock down that data. Encrypted backups are still best, though, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'd go one step further. A couple of points I'll add here. By the way, just got word that we're going to do a bonus round of the map. We got the Ukraine has joined from Europe, and we also have Hong Kong has tuned in. That's like midnight 30 for you guys over there. Welcome, thank you.
Thanks for joining us, guys.
Elvis Lamb, cool name, by the way. I like that. Anyways, but back to these points here. The first two, the next backup will be an active full and the temporary reduced space efficiency with the fast cloning. This is akin to really changing the tires while the vehicle's driving down the road. There's going to be a small interruption here because we've started on one way, and if we've implemented encryption, this behavior is going to happen. And then likewise on the purpose-built dedupe appliance storage efficiency, that's true. There will be a loss, right? Now, I do know that a lot of the storage appliances can have target side encryption, and that might be something to encourage as well, especially if, quote unquote, rogue access picking up that data cannot do so unencrypted. And if that's the case, you want to consider just using the purpose built. And I got a comment from the field from Randy Lee. He says, quote, I had a customer tell me that the deduplication rates, quote, really dropped after encryption. Correct. Yeah, it was. You can learn that lesson that way. Mm-hmm. Now, one thing I'll highlight is encrypted data is still a candidate for compression. So keep that in mind. It's just not a real candidate for deduplication in the same way, especially on disks locally on site. It's going to just spin and spin CPU to get just minimal trivial gains, right? So it's not going to be worth it. But again, when you think about the cybersecurity risks, I think this is worth doing. Awesome. So we're going to leave it right here at the Dragon, just because the Dragon's cool. But hey, Michael, thank you so much for joining us here on the stream today.
As always, thanks for having me, Rick, and happy Friday to everyone. Thanks for coming to check this out, and we'll be back for more talks, no doubt, soon.
Indeed. I love giving the opportunity to take real practitioners with the legends and the vanguards with their contents to share. Another person from Brazil has joined. Thank you. And there's two things I want to highlight coming up next. On Monday at noon, New York time, Industry Insights episode number 78. This time with Jason and Jeff. And the topic is dispelling the myths of regulatory compliance. And, Jeff focuses and has a focus on Veeam's public sector business, especially here in North America. So that'll be a really good episode to check out. And then a week from today, myself and Melissa will be back on the stream talking about the scale-out backup repository. We think it's time to bring that one back around. And we got another QTube from we got a question on YouTube from Anita. Anita's question is, can I do a 7-zip of a Veeam backup? I don't recommend doing that. First of all, Anita, a Veeam backup will actually have a compression done already, as long as you didn't turn off encryption or turn off the compression. Internally, we use like zlib or something like that as a commercial compressor to do that. But if you need to make the backups portable, Anita, which is I think what you're trying to do, I would really look into the export or the backup copy job, or making a copy to like a removable media, transporting it that way. I think just play with some of the other options, or a one-off job, or one of the things I like to do, Anita, because it sounds like you're wanting to move something, okay, is I would set up the capacity tier of the cloud and then put the backups there, and then import that on the new site, again, re-entering the password, because remember what I said at the start, if you don't encrypt your data in the cloud, someone else will, but you can use the cloud as that kind of, it's like a modern day sneaker net. You can use a bucket to do that, right? And then if you're wanting to just reduce space, I would work backwards on the Veeam jobs to put a little bit more compression in play. And then if you're wanting to quote unquote archive, I would look into using the archive tier for that write once, read never, but never say never copy. Anything you want to add to that, Michael?
Yeah, first of all, tape's also still a candidate.
Oh, that
oldie
thing.
but a goodie. But yeah, I fully agree with what you're saying. And it does bring into what you're saying. You're going to be talking about in a couple of weeks with scale out, so it might be worth checking that one out. But definitely make sure any copies of backups are being orchestrated by Veeam. The amount of times I've gone into customer deployments and I've seen, for example, it's going out to a NAS, and then that NAS is doing its own sync job to another site. Veeam isn't validating the data. Veeam isn't doing any error recovery on that data. Veeam 1 isn't getting any insights to tell you that actually that didn't work. You've got so many disattached systems that there's so many points of failure there. It's better to let Veeam orchestrate it and deliver those reports to you as to how it's doing.
Yeah, good shout. I mean, very few things end well when end users will get into manipulating Veeam backup files directly. I think we can all agree with that.
Definitely.
All right, Phil drops in one more question. How can I become a Veeam legend? Well, Phil, you got to go to the community.veeam.com and you got to engage and you got to be awesome. So that's the short answer. But we would take a biannual intake. And if you go in the news section every week, Ksenia and I give an update there on a video format, so you can just learn a little bit about that community. But short stories, just be like Michael.
If I can just add to that as well. So I actually recently did a post on there talking about my first year in review, because for those that might not be aware, so the first time I actually got to present alongside the Sir Rickatron himself was actually at Veeam, where we spoke about, yeah,
Holding
it was
beer.
an amazing, yeah,
No, something else.
hold my beer while I restore to the cloud. And we did talk about all these backups, and we showed, from on-prem to cloud, cloud to on-prem, on-prem to on-prem via the cloud. It really was a good watch, but it talks about that. It talks about some of the other opportunities as well that Veeam have done. Veeam Legends is a really, I can't overstate it enough, really amazing program to get involved in. And it's led by some amazing talent, such as Ksenia and Rick, amongst all the other Veemers in the background there. And yeah, about a year and a half ago, I was sat there going, this community hub looks pretty interesting. Let's go sign up, and look where I am now. So get involved. Everyone's friendly. There's some legends on here as well, and hi to all you guys. But yeah, it's an amazing community. Come join in.
Yeah, true. You're too kind. And well, Mark just told me PNG, Papua New Guinea, is logged in. So that might be a first for the live stream. So that is great. Outstanding. And so thank you so much for the kind words. And a big shout out to Felicia, one of our producers based in Texas. And then Mark, one of our producers based in the ATL. And on behalf of the whole Veeam team, I'd like to thank everyone for watching today. And again, thank you so much, Michael, for rocking it with me here today.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, that concludes our stream. Have a great weekend, everyone.